Hey everybody, real quick, in between my little day of scheduled events here, I just want to go over about immunotherapies, why they are like terrorist types of cells. And I'll tell you why. I did briefly explain that in my last video of the Sunday Morning Live, but then we kind of got off track a little bit, but we needed to because we needed to get something figured out. But we have a system of law and order. Okay? A system of law and order in our society keeps the peace. It keeps people orderly and life-giving, because when you have anarchy and you have people violating the laws and violating the orders out there as far as just like disorder, and then we have crimes being created, we have people being hurt, we have a lot of things that happen negatively when you violate law and order in our society. Okay, so it means that if you're going 90 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, you could potentially hurt a child, you could potentially hurt a pedestrian, you could go out of control when you're going 90 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone when somebody is backing out of their driveway slowly and you don't see them. Okay, so there's reasons why we have laws in our community to keep law and order, to keep the peace, to keep pro-life going. So when you're doing immunotherapies, okay, you are essentially violating the laws of your body. It's like you're committing acts of terrorism on your body. No different than what happened in New Zealand. So they had somebody, a citizen of New Zealand, commit acts of terror against its own body of citizens. And so it was an imbalanced person that wanted to clean up its perceived threat, which is a coagulation of another type of cell that it didn't agree with. And it was trying to neutralize that perceived danger. Well, really what should have happened is if that cell of sorts, the perceived danger, if it was actually violating the laws of that society, the law enforcement, which is basically your immune system and your 11 different systems, would go in and neutralize that on its own, because it would be abiding by the laws of that system. No different than in that community. If that cell, that perceived danger was triggering, if it was really truly dangerous, the system would take care and neutralize those cells. But no, there was nothing dangerous about that gathering. So what that terrorist, that person, that imbalanced person, that white supremacist, he was like an immunotherapy. It is like when a doctor or some thing goes in and uses the body against itself to then go and neutralize what it programs it to neutralize, because there's a specific perceived problem. So when a doctor goes in and gives you a cancer vaccine, okay, what they're doing is they're taking those imbalances, because you need yeast, you need antibodies, and you need hormones. But when something is imbalanced, like cancer, well, there's also viruses that get attached to it. And so what happens is that these cells multiply based upon what is feeding and fostering those conditions. So what happens with when a doctor comes in and tries to eradicate those specific cells without hurting allegedly good tissue, like chemotherapy goes in and neutralizes everything in its path, well, these cancer vaccines are supposed to be more directed, more tunneled, and programmed to go after those types of cells that are rapidly dividing with those viruses attached to it. But what happens is that you're getting that vaccine artificially activating your immune system with this vaccine, which is that cancer virus that you've created, and it's in your body, and then it's supposed to create antibodies to then go after all of the same programmed pathogens. But what they don't realize is that the damage has already been done, and you're creating more antibodies that to go after those pathogens, but it's causing an imbalance in that system with all these antibodies that will eventually agglutinate. And so that's why it's dangerous when you are circumventing the way your immune system is supposed to work. No different than vigilantism. Vigilantism is no different than immunotherapies. No different than these terrorist cells that go and try to neutralize perceived dangers. It's an imbalance. So when a doctor goes in and artificially activates your immune system, sometimes they have to because a person isn't willing to protect themselves or take care of themselves, so these shortcuts are needed. Well, I guess that's the same mentality as some of these terrorists that are out there that are racist or white supremacist or another type of supremacist. They think that the system isn't taking care of the country as a whole, and they see that these specific interest groups are perceived dangerous, so they're going to go in and act as a vigilante. They're going to circumvent the system and do it on their own. No different than what a doctor does and takes your cancer cells and puts it in a vaccine to induce antibodies to then neutralize that specific thing. Well, guess what happens? There is a negative consequence when you are circumventing the system. Okay, when you violate the laws of the system, acting in vigilantism or using the system against itself, is when, yes, you will have major imbalances and anomalies. So immunotherapies is no different than what happened in New Zealand. Okay, it's a type of vigilantism. Yes, since we can't legislate morals in our society as far as health, you can't force somebody to have good health. So they have an event, shortcuts are created. Okay, it gives you a stay of execution for a minute, but then it causes the side effects, which is then more imbalances in your other systems that will then eventually culminate into eventual death. Okay? So that's why I've made that assertion that immunotherapies, and I'm not saying certain types, I'm saying straight across the board, immunotherapies are like terrorist cells because you're using the system against itself and you're bypassing the laws. Vigilantism is bypassing the laws, because if somebody is truly dangerous, there has to be, first of all, intent, and there has to be a context. Okay? And so somebody that is trying to neutralize something that shouldn't be neutralized, well, they didn't go through the proper channels. Because maybe actually when you're trying to let's say that this guy is trying to neutralize these people, but these people aren't bad. That terrorist is trying to neutralize something that wasn't bad. In his mind, it was bad because he has an imbalance. That those people in that mosque were not bad. Those cancer cells are not bad in of itself. They're only bad because there is an imbalance. But taking those cancer cells and putting them into a vaccine and then injecting somebody with their own disease to create antibodies, that actually is a bad way of dealing with that problem. You're actually compounding the issue. Okay? By using other systems against the system to then have this specific outcome where you don't have this type of inflammation, or you're trying to lower the cancer numbers. Really, if you're going to deal with cancer, disease, and chronic illness, it is not using antibiotic methods or immunotherapies. When your therapy is when you are utilizing hormones and you're utilizing antibodies and you're utilizing the system's defense systems against itself, and you're not actually taking an outside influence that is positive, like strategic nutrition, and then feeding the body correctly. No, you're taking an already programmed body that's already being programmed to die in some way, and then you're trying to manipulate the outcome. You're not actually getting to the root cause, which we already know about root cause. So when you're taking the system that's already been programmed on a death trajectory and you're trying to lower numbers, you're just compounding the problem. So when you're taking an outside force, let's say an outside tribunal, the UN or somebody, say, hey, we're looking at this whole country as a whole, and we're looking at, are there crimes against humanity? Is this specific group of people, are they violating the laws? Do they need to go through a trial and a questioning, just like those congressional hearings, with the Trump guy, the lawyer for the Trump, to see if there was intent, if there was laws being violated? Okay, it has to go through the proper channels. Justice has to go through the proper channels. So does your body when it needs to heal 100% in the right context. It must go through the proper channels. But again, we can't legislate morals. We can't make this person who drinks and does drugs and doesn't take care of their body to go through the proper channels if they are allowed the shortcuts. But if you're allowed the shortcuts, then you're rolling the dice. And you won't know from one day to the next if that shortcut is going to have you survive for a year or 2 or 5 or not even that. I mean, yeah, you may get qualified for this specific immunotherapy, and they'll be honest with you, hey, well, you have a 20% chance of living and prolonging your life. But what does that mean? Does that mean that if you were supposed to die like on Thursday, that now you get 2 or 3 extra days? What does that mean, prolonging your life, when it comes to immunotherapies? They don't give you any concrete number. You know why? Because they can't guarantee it. But how do you guarantee with chili juice that you will live indefinitely? Because you're working in the right context. You're not violating the laws of your immune system. You're not working with antibiotics. You're not working with anti-inflammatories. You're not working with antivirals. Anything anti in the allopathic holistic world is against your whole body as a whole. Now, even the probiotics out there that are paired with the vinegars and the waters and the grains and the milks and the sugars and the fruits, that's the wrong way to look at probiotics as something as part of a real true healing, because you're pairing it with items that actually feed cancer and candida, okay, as well as antibodies, creating antibodies, vinegar, fermented ethanol, and it also has sugar in it because it's fermented fruit. Because apples are fruit sugars. When they're fermented, it enhances the sugar stuff that will feed cancer and candida. The same thing with any other kombucha. You're fermenting tea. Tea is antibiotic. You ferment tea, you're fermenting with lactobacillus, but then you're also creating more antibodies. Okay, when you ferment a fruit, you're creating, lactobacillus, which is cancer's mortal enemy, but then you're also feeding the cancer. So what the hell, feeding and fighting the cancer with kombucha, fermented fruit, such as wine, which has mycotoxins and really some horrible yeast. So no, obviously alcohol is not the good thing. So when you have the right probiotic with the right salt, pairing with the right vegetable with the right nutrients, you have a powerhouse of nutrition that doesn't circumvent the proper channels for your body to actually heal properly. So immunotherapies are terrorist cells, are like terror cells. And then those terror cells out there that shoot people because they have an imbalance of a perceived danger, that's no different than what happens when people are circumventing the proper channels in their immune system. Everything is connected, y'all. If you don't get that, everything is connected, you will still stay stuck in the stories and you won't understand the laws. And then you get distracted by all the storytelling going on, because guess what? When you actually break everything down to science, all that distraction of the story about what happens and why finally melts away. You're not going to have the story of Little Red Riding Hood anymore. You're not going to have the story of Peter and the Wolf anymore. You're not going to have all these stories, these allegories that try to explain why this happens, why that happens. No, now you're going to see complete cause and effect. You're going to understand science and chemistry and cells. Why do cells multiply? Because it's either growth or because it is reproducing because of a mutation. Why does reproduction happen? Because of a mutation. So when you are creating immunotherapies, you are causing more mutations in your body. And every single immunotherapy out there is causing mutations because they're not helping the body. They're just manipulating the hormones and manipulating the antibodies and manipulating your system to have a specific outcome. It's shortcuts. Shortcuts lead to mutations. This is why humanity is dying. Have a good day. Bye.